Rugby's greatest rivalry, the second test at Cape Town, is this weekend, folks. The teams have been named. The coaches have given their press conferences. There's been a few interesting words from the coaches. We'll get to those in a second. We are going to go look through the lineups, some of the stats, predictions, and you guys can let us know your thoughts. Interestingly, the Boks named their team early this time. Russie has a habit of naming his team, pretty early in the piece. Put the cards on the table and I don't know if you can call it a mind game, but just put the ball in the other coach's court. He didn't do that for the test last week, but he switched back to his regular old self with this one. The All Blacks only named their team last night, New Zealand time, like 10 o'clock. So hence why we're doing this video a day late. Apologies for that. But yeah, Dave also had a few interesting words and some issues that he's been raising to World Rugby as well, based on the first test. Let's start with the Boks. They obviously dropped number 1 in the world last week with that loss to the ABs at Ellis Park. So they are ranked 2 in the world at the moment. They can flip that back to number 1 if they are to get a win in Cape Town. And apparently Cape Town's got a bit of rain on the forecast. I had a quick look before recording this, and it seems like the chance of rain decreases throughout the day, so it might be fine prior to kickoff, but it also might still be raining, and it's pretty much guaranteed that there is going to be rain prior to kickoff at the very least, so potentially some wet conditions. And in wet conditions, bring on Andre Pollard, man. The veteran is back at number 10, so maybe that means it's indicative of some potential wet weather rugby tactics from the Boks. Now, they are without some guys injured. Obviously, Cheslin Colby went off injured in that last game, so he is unavailable. Partly, maybe that also brings Pollard's goal kicking into the mix. Also, Grant Williams is injured. And a couple of guys have got milestone games. Peter Steph du Toit is in his 100th test. Cape Town is a very special one for that. Legend of the Bok game. I'll call him that even though he's not retired yet. He is a legend, with the career that he's had. And Oxenche is going to get his 50th cap. So there are some milestones and there are some changes. For the front row, Oxenche, Malcolm Marks, and Wilco Low, they got some really good pay last week. But it turns out Ethan de Groot, the All Blacks starting loosehead last week, was not only sick, but had also a kind of sore knee. So we did see a bolstering from the All Blacks pack once George Bauer and then also Almua and Fletcher Newell came on. But these guys will absolutely be looking to turn the screws on the All Black front row, as they were doing, particularly in that first half last week. They've also brought in Thomas du Toit and for Zachary Porthen as the replacement tight head. He is much more of a scrummaging tight head prop, I think, than Porthen is known to be. Porthen is still very early on in his test career, but Thomas du Toit will not let up where Wilco Low leaves off in terms of the scrummaging. And that guy also was in a press conference. Well, he is incredibly well-spoken. Thomas du Toit. Goodness me. You always think that props just want to scrum, but man, he is very eloquent in the way he speaks, old Thomas du Toit. Steenekamp is still there, and then Dion Fourie is the reserve hooker in this one. Remember, he wasn't even in the Boks squad until that Stormers game at the very start of this tour. He played on the flank for the Stormers, the 39-year-old, and he had some incredible results at the breakdown against the ABs. I don't think there's been much talked about Dion Fourie's inclusion, because maybe Andre Pollard starting at 10 is a bigger storyline, and Sia being back is also a bigger storyline. Peter Steph's 100 is a bigger storyline, but Dion Fourie, man, I don't know when he's going to come on, but the dude is a breakdown fiend. He's just so good at the breakdown. Absolutely look out for that, man. Remember, he played that World Cup final where he had to come on much earlier than expected. Flanker, hooker, hybrid man. So, yeah, watch out for Dion in the number 16 jersey. Etzebeth and Nokia continue on in the second row. Nokia was the kind of main line-out man for the Boks last week, and he had like 7 line-out takes. So very, very busy. Sia is back. He was initially named alongside Paul de Villiers to see who would be fit for the game, because Sia has been coming back to match fitness, but he passed all his midweek tests, so he has been confirmed as starting at number 6. I do think that will help the Boks, just in terms of the fact that Sia has been the captain for such a long time. And if you're going to get a guy to, for want of a better word, manage the referee, you'd be hard-pressed to go better than Sia Kolisi. He's pretty good at getting his messages across, and that's a factor of every rugby team. If you've got a player who is either sometimes too quiet, maybe Peter Steff last week was a little bit too quiet, or sometimes too loud. There are some captains who are continually mouthing off against the referees, and then you feel like the referee just hears too much of it and just kind of shuts them down. Nah, there's a happy medium, which is an important one to get your message across to the referees from what your team is seeing, what they're seeing the opposition doing, and plant some seeds, manage the referee. That's part of the game. And I feel like Sia, along with all his big clear-outs and tackles and whatnot, I feel like Sia is going to add to the department in that kind of leadership aspect. Peter Steff, his 100th game, he can focus on his role as just being that workhorse, shooting out of the line, making a heap of carries, winning some line-up ball, being one of the top tacklers in the team. So he can focus on that role with Sia being back too. And then Jasper Wiese, boy, was he getting his hands on the ball a lot last week. How many carries did he have? I wrote it down. 18. 18 carries. Although I wouldn't mind if he got a few less carries this week, and the wingers got a little bit more. Like Colby had 2 carries last week, and Creel, who essentially took over from Arendse on the other wing, had 3 carries. Like, it'd be nice, as much as I love seeing Jasper truck it up the guts, it'd be nice to see them, if they can get a bit more width on the ball. Now, obviously, Kurtley Arendse last week meant the backline was very disrupted, so we'll see how they can click if the guys in the starting 15 are able to stay on the field for at least, I don't know, half the game, rather than having to kind of rejig things. Reinach comes in for the injured Grant Williams at 9. Grant Williams didn't have his finest outing last week anyway, so it might have been a tactical shift either way. Pollard comes in at 10, so that is the absolute veteran 9-10 combo. Both these guys are well deep into their Springboks career, but Pollard is, you feel like, pretty unflappable, and in the wet conditions with his kicking game, and he's a big physical running dude, could do what Dave Rennie is expecting by, opting for high balls and looking to win the physical collisions. Dale Indy and Creel will be hoping to play in the midfield this week as opposed to kind of shifting around with that Kurtley Arendse injury. Kurtley Arendse, who went off with that failed HIA last week with the mouthguard flaring up, is back, so he's not been ruled out with an HIA, so that's good news. He's in the right wing. Ethan Hooker comes in for Colby, so it's a total wing switch. Arendse to 14 and Hooker in at 11. He's still a young man, old Ethan Hooker, and he's very powerful, very fast, so very different player from the likes of a Cheslin Colby, but certainly a danger man on that wing, can play in the midfield too. And then Damian Willems was class last week at fullback. Like the All Blacks tried last week a couple of those let's hoof our own high balls and get someone to try and tap it back. Willems gobbled them up. He was, very, very secure under those high balls. So that's the box starting 15. Khaleesi's back, Peter Steff's 100th, Ox's 50th, and then the veterans, the 9-10, plus Ethan Hooker coming in for Colby, I think are the main kind of talking points there. Bench, I've already mentioned the front row replacements, but Diacha comes in as your lock replacement. Esterhuizen, he's in the number 20 jumper, so they'll be looking to use him as a flanker, unless there's injuries, I suppose. Honeycomb is there. He was good last month when playing for the Boks, so hopefully he can kind of recapture some of that form. Morne van der Berg comes into the team as the replacement 9, and then Sasha drops to the bench. There's no Mani Libok in this one. I was kind of fearing Mani playing, but then I guess without Colby to potentially do the goal kicking, they wanted to go with Hondre. I think if Cheslin plays, then there's a better chance for Mani, because Mani plays better when he doesn't have to kick the goals, but no spot for Mani this week. And also Paul de Villiers, who was initially named, alongside Sia, drops out of the 23, even though he was like the top tackler for the Boks last week. Russie did talk a lot in the press conference about putting the blame on himself and the way that he managed the bench not working out, and the reject backline just not working out. He didn't put the right subs on. Maybe he should have put Willems on the wing. I feel like they still have a little bit of risk in the bench in terms of if they do lose Kurtley Arendse again early, you're still looking at a very rejigged backline. But Russie seems to think that he's got that lesson. But I mean, ultimately, hopefully, us as rugby fans would just like to see all the players not have to go off injured within the first kind of 5 minutes anyway. But yeah, we'll see how things go. For the All Blacks, they have made a few changes, and they got a few guys on the bench in particular who played against the Lions in that kind of last of the midweek games, with De Groot and Lord having that big head collision which means they're both out for the 12-day stand-down period. So De Groot gets a break. Hopefully he can get himself back 100% fit. But that means George Bauer is promoted to loose head. And he was incredible last week from the bench. Absolutely helped stabilize the All Blacks scrum alongside of other few kind of positional changes like Parker coming in, Tupu Vai switching, and there were Almua coming on and Newell coming on. There was a lot of pieces to that puzzle, but certainly George Bauer really, really impressed at scrum time. So hopefully he can do a similar job this week. Taylor and Lomax continue on. There were some people calling for Almua to get a start, but it is still Cody Taylor who gets the nod in the hooker jersey. We'll be looking to improve the line-out. The line-out last week was a little bit shaky. Vai solves the locking question, because Lord's out, of who was gonna play in the second row. Because remember, with that Lions game and the locking stocks looking a little bit thin, you remember there's no Scott Barrett on this tour. Someone was going to have to play in that Lions game in all likelihood, and then back up in this second test. And they've solved that problem by moving Vai from 6 into the second row and then bringing in Parker to the number 6 jersey. So none of the guys who played excessive minutes in that Lions fixture have to start in this test. So that is Dave's way of managing that. Vai and Holland, I think, is actually a pretty good lock and duo. Holland's been really impressive. He is always really high work rate, high energy. Vai's a great lineup disruptor, even if we didn't really disrupt that much of the box ball last week. He'll be looking to try and do a bit more of that. Parker does get a start at 6. Dave Rennie said that this kind of test suits a physical player like him. He is certainly a big body. And then Luke Jacobson and Artie Savia continue on at 7 and 8. I know Artie always comes under the spotlight, because he joined the squad so late. He had a bit of extra rest, and because he's been over in Japan, because he's replaced, Scott Barrett as the All Blacks captain and whatnot, he always gets a fair bit of flack. But he didn't seem to miss a beat last week, did he? So he's still the captain, and I don't know. Have you seen that video where he pulls over Sean Fitzpatrick and puts his arm around him during the anthem? That was pretty special. That's not even during the game moment. But that's a bit of leadership. So he's another guy who I feel like is fairly good at managing the referee as well. He's gotten a lot better at that as his career has gone on. Cam Roygaard and Ruben Love at 9-10. I think that's proved to be our best 9-10 combo at the minute. That's the Hurricanes duo. Obviously, Roygaard is streets ahead of everyone else in terms of the number 9 jersey, and he was, really, really dangerous last week. How many tackles did he bust? Like 6? I think he was our second guy in terms of busted tackles. He is such a handful at number 9. But then Ruben Love, with all the other bloody 10s in the squad, they called up Mwanga. They got Josh Jacob. They got, Bodie Barrett, who's not having his finest time and whatnot. A lot of other guys, Damian McKenzie, vying for that 10 jersey. But Ruben Love, I think at the moment, is a pretty easy choice. I don't think there was anything in that Lions game that made you think we need to disrupt that established 9-10 combo of Roygaard and Love. So they continue on. Geordie Barrett and Tupaia in the midfield. Likewise, that's a very good duo. Tupaia was actually the guy they were sending for the taps, but he didn't really win them against Willems, like I said. And Geordie Barrett, even though he's in the past, with his pure size and his ability to play fullback and whatnot, tended to be one of our better guys under the high balls. He wasn't great under the high balls last week, and it is certainly going to be an area, along with the scrum, where we're going to be tested. They've shifted things up on the wings with Leroy Carter replacing Josh Morby. Josh Morby was kind of talked up because he can play fullback as well with his ability under the high balls, but he didn't really have to field it. I think he only had 1 last week. I don't think he caught it. So, yeah, they've brought in Leroy Carter. They've said that his defense is the kind of key attribute that sees him ahead of in Morby. And they asked in the press conference, because Leroy Carter was one of the guys speaking as well, what is your plan with the high balls? And he basically said, try to catch them. So there you go. They've been working on it. Catch the things. That'd be nice for a change, wouldn't it? Will Jordan, how many tries is he good for in a match? He still continues on the right wing, and then D-Mac at fullback. So, yeah, that's the All Black starting 15. It's pretty stable with Vai's switch and Bauer's promotion. Parker, those are the kind of main changes. There are a few tinkerings on the bench. Almua continues on, so he's still preferred to Tokiaho, which I think makes sense because Almua's been in good form. Numia comes in as our loose head prop replacement in the absence of De Groot, and he made a difference to that scrum last week, right? Not last week, last game against the Lions. I think Dave said he didn't even want to play him. It was initially going to be Tuangafasi who'd been flown over, but Tuangafasi had a fever, so they couldn't play him. So they had to play Numia. He got 10 minutes, but he made a difference in those 10 minutes. There was certainly one big scrum from the ABs at the end of that game, so fingers crossed he can have a good game. Fingers crossed these guys aren't getting sick. Dave Rennie in this press conference was sniffing a lot. I hope there's not a bug going around the team, because as I said, the group's been a bit crook. Tuangafasi's been crook. There's a lot of flu going around New Zealand, and those Jamie Hatter and Tuangafasi just flew over from New Zealand, flu-ridden New Zealand over. Anyway, Newell continues on. Paddy Tuipulotu does get the nod as the other lock, so he did play like 48 minutes against the Lions, so they might be looking to manage his minutes pretty carefully. Peter Lakai continues on. He played 20-odd minutes against the Lions. Kyle Preston plays another game. He's getting a heck of a lot of games. He's played every game thus far. He got 20-odd minutes against the Lions. ALB also 20-odd minutes against the Lions. And then, as I said, Josh Morby does drop to the bench for this one. Anton Segner is unfortunately out of the tour. He's been ruled out with an infection in his knee, and Cortez Ratama is not quite back fit yet. Aside from Roygaard with his 6 defenders beaten and 2 try assists as our key man, you really got to highlight a couple of the other guys. Geordie Barrett last week, 5 turnovers, 1 was nuts. Absolutely nuts. One of his best games in the black jersey, barring the dropped high balls, and he had 15 tackles. He was massive. Will Jordan beat 7 defenders. And like I mentioned, like Colby had 2 carries, Creel had 3 on the box wings. That's 5 carries for both wingers. Will Jordan alone had like 9. So they were really loving getting the ball into his hands. Some stats for you for the teams. We'll start with the box, because I feel like they had some obviously good things last week. The scrum, particularly in that first half, was on fire. They were putting the All Blacks pack on wheels, weren't they? They had the territory. They tested the All Blacks under the high balls. But 78% as a tackle percentage is low. And I know tackle percentage is one of those stats that you can't always read too much into, because it depends on the way the team defends. But even by the Springboks' own standards, 78% is just, it's a lot lower than their normal, like 86 or whatever, 85. You know, it's just low. More tackles than a Springbok team would ordinarily miss. Likewise, 23 turnovers conceded is just too high. Some of that is the All Blacks pinching their ball. Some of that is just the box guys dropping the ball cold, passing it over the shoulders, not taking those difficult passes. In another game, they might have taken them, but they didn't. And then 22 entries. They had 22 entries and scored just the 1 try. It's a red zone efficiency stat. It's often the one that you look at, which makes the difference between winning and losing a game. They created the chances, but just didn't take them. Story of the box game last week. A lot of credit to that has to go to the All Blacks defense, to be fair, the scrambled D. For the All Blacks, 9 22 entries. 1 less than the box, 5 tries. So much more efficient in that red zone. Also, kicked 19 times. More than the box kicked. Despite the fact that the box put us under pressure under the high balls, the box were putting in a lot more contestable high ball kicks. All Blacks kicking a fair bit more for distance, but the All Blacks actually kicked more ball than the box. 19 kicks to 17 last week. They tried a few of those slapbacks, like I mentioned, but they didn't really pay off. Also, the turnovers 1 count. 5 of those were Geordie, but 14 turnovers 1 to the box 5 is a massive difference. And that's why I highlight Dion Ferree coming off the bench for the box, because he is a massive guy in that area. Our line-out, though, the All Blacks, 79% is too low. Just too low. I highlighted it in the preview that it's been a bit shaky. It's one of the areas that really needs work. The box one was 93%. The box missed 1. Line-out was just a little bit under pressure. But I do think both teams will be better, man. I don't think the All Blacks scrum, fingers crossed, I don't think it gets obliterated like it did last week. If the group really was crook, and I think Bauer stands up okay. Oh, I forgot to mention what Dave Rennie said. He said that he'd been talking to World Rugby about the way there might have been kind of walking around in the scrum. So he's apparently formally raised that with World Rugby. And that's one of those things, like Russie wasn't very direct in his press conferences about like ref stuff. They mentioned a little bit about the breakdown, like slowing the ball down, him and Cobus Reinach. But it wasn't quite as direct. Dave was very direct about the scrum, what we want to see from the refs at the scrum. He's very direct about planting that seed, was Dave Rennie. But yeah, apart from the scrum, I do think the All Blacks lineup will be better. I don't think the Boks drop as much ball, so fingers crossed it is a higher level game than last week, whatever the result. All Blacks are now number 1 in the world, so are they the favourites? No. The Boks in Cape Town are still the favourites. 6 points with the bookies and 6 points with the Rugby Forecast algorithm. So it's a little bit reined in from last week where the Boks went in it as slightly more comfortable favourites. Is it on Cape Town? It's another 5:10 kind of late afternoon, early evening kickoff over in South Africa, which is again 3 in the morning for those of us in New Zealand, but I'll be getting up to watch it. Both kids want to get up to watch it this week, so that'll be fun, dragging them out of bed in the middle of the night. Nika Amashu-Kelly was supposed to be refereeing this one, but he is also sick, so they have pulled him. And Angus Gardner, the Aussie who refereed the Lions game the other day, he will be refereeing this one. I actually think if that is going to do anything, it slightly helps the All Blacks a little bit because he referees Super Rugby. He's a guy who likes to keep the game moving. That is definitely one of Angus Gardner's things. So that might work slightly in the All Blacks' favour, the familiarity with him from Super Rugby. Guys, let us know your thoughts. If you want All Blacks gear, including the greatest rivalry jersey, check the link down in the description to the All Blacks shop. They are an affiliate of the channel. But I hope you guys enjoyed the preview. I look forward to the game. You guys take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you guys again soon. See you later.